Great. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here with everybody today, especially my fellow panelists. Outstanding. Lest you think I'm the Texas pipeline interloper, I am a New England native. Went to school here, was born here, raised here, grad school here, and only was lured down to Texas a few years ago. So I have a great deal of interest in what happens here in New England. So we'll talk a little bit about what Spectra does here in New England and the Northeast and nationwide. First of all, we operate about 20,000 miles of interstate natural gas pipeline, some crude oil lines, storage nationwide, predominantly on the eastern half of the country, but also in Canada. And it includes the largest natural gas transmission infrastructure here in New England by virtue of the Algonquin system that runs up through from New Jersey up to Boston through Connecticut, and the Maritimes and Northeast pipeline system, which comes down from Nova Scotia and into northern Massachusetts. So very important topic. I will say over the past several years we've invested more than $10 billion in 60 different midstream and pipeline infrastructure projects nationwide, including about $2 billion to move more gas from the Marcellus region, right at this region's doorstep, closer and closer to the Northeast. And a lot more is needed. We've got about $35 billion of projects on the in our outlook over the next 5 years. Certainly this past winter has really shined a spotlight on this region, and it's very clear that this region is inadequately supplied with pipeline infrastructure. In fact, I'll go so far as to say is our Texas Eastern system, which comes across Pennsylvania, is about 6 billion cubic feet per day. By the time it gets to New Jersey, it's about 4 billion cubic feet per day. As it comes right through here, it narrows to 1.5 billion cubic feet per day, a little less than that. So that infrastructure can be improved with the right contracting mechanisms. And certainly with over half of the electricity now, as these gentlemen have said, being produced by natural gas or generated by natural gas now, now is the time to make sure that we have the right contracting scheme in place. Just as an example, we recently built a 16-mile pipeline into New York City to debottleneck that area. Before we built the pipeline, it just went into service last winter. So 2 winters ago, the premium that New York City paid paid versus its neighbor was 63%. Last winter it was 16%. So debottlenecking does make an enormous difference to a region. We're doing the same thing here. So the Algonquin incremental expansion project is one that we've had on the books for a little while. It's subscribed to by almost every major gas distribution company in the region, including National Grid, including Northeast Utilities, City of Norwich, and UIL. So all the major players here. But it's just gas utilities. And until we find a way for the electric generators or some proxy thereof to sign up, the generation issue isn't going to be going away. So a lot of things are necessary for this to happen. I mentioned the New York project. It took us 4 years to get that project permitted. We'd certainly like to see a more expedited timeline. In fact, we noted that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission back in 2005 had an effort to streamline the process, and in fact, unfortunately, the process just got a little bit longer, and it keeps getting longer as we move through with all this infrastructure being proposed. So I look forward to that, to the discussion, and I'll just leave it there. My prepared remarks, I think, have been distributed.
Thank you. Okay, let me ask you a few questions. Let me start out with the general question of basically we're here to inform the QER. So do you see a federal role for helping address New England's infrastructure needs? And think about, executive, legislative, administrative options. So, Gordon, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I think there's multiple roles. The one role that the DOE, I think, is doing a good job of now is putting a spotlight on the problem. I'm not sure the DOE specifically can solve this problem, but I think there's a way that the FERC could help us solve the problem. And if they need legislative help, there's another avenue as well. The basic problem is that when we restructured the industry, you sort of look at the way the industry worked and still works in other parts of the country, like Florida, for example. Florida is highly dependent on natural gas. they don't have the issue that we have today. They really only have, solar, nuclear, and natural gas. If they need to build new gas pipelines to supply generation demand, Florida Pound Light goes to the state regulator and asks them to approve the flow-through of those costs. That linkage got broken when we restructured the wholesale electricity markets. Without getting into a long discussion about that, the consequence is that the wholesale, the generators in the wholesale electricity markets have a fairly short-term focus. And as Bill will tell you, he's not going to build a pipe unless somebody is prepared to sign up for a long period of time. And that's the problem that has to be solved. And it's going to take some creative thinking, I think, here in New England and possibly with the FERC to get this done.
I would agree. Obviously, DOE can play a key role in not only shining the light on the process, but bringing together the parties that we need to address this. It is, as Tip O'Neill said, all politics are local, and this is a local issue in New England. We hang together, the 6 states, but sometimes not so much. So anything you can do to encourage that and convene these kinds of things between the 6 states to bring a common focus on the issue would be terrific. As Gordon said, FERC is our key. I personally don't believe, and our attorneys don't believe, that we need to have legislation. We think the Federal Power Act is broad enough for them to act. But we are going to need to intervene in the markets when they don't work, and that means special kind of tariffing that have been suggested and capacity managing that has been suggested by this committee that referred to as NESCO.